I want to help you land this within your individual organizations, and I want to get you in the thought process of, if I actually had a security event, if I had a threat actor that was attacking my organization, how would you feel? How would you respond? What would the communication look like? And our topic today is really about the first 24 hours. And I want to put that in context by making it a little bit real here with some of the rising trends that we've seen within the organizations that we assist and that we help secure. What we found is that by putting layers of security around your organizations from a technical perspective, from a user training perspective, the threat actors are finding it harder and harder to attack your individual organizations. And that's great. We're putting the right layers of security in place to protect and identify and detect and see what's going on there. So the threat actors, of course, they're still financially motivated, and they're going to other parties and attacking the vendors and the customers that you work with. And maybe they're doing that just as a shotgun approach. It's not that they're specifically going after you, it's that you're working with somebody that maybe has a lower security posture or lower security maturity than you do. What we're finding is that when a threat actor finds a target of opportunity like that, a business that you might be working with, they're getting in and compromising that business's environment, and they're compromising those email accounts. And then they're riding along with the regular correspondence that that vendor or that trusted partner is having with likely you. As the threat actor explores what they can see, they're then able to see, oh, they've got a relationship with company ABC, and your company ABC, while you've got strong security, probably has at least one or two people that regularly correspond with them. And the threat actor jumps right into that email communication, corresponds with your people inside your business, sending legitimate email from a legitimate contact account at that partner company. And they're just using the same terminology, the same verbiage. AI is great at helping you write very convincing text that references other things that have been in recent conversations. And the threat actor frequently, from what we've been seeing recently, has the goal of saying, hey, I'm sending you this sensitive information. It references exactly the conversation that we had last week. I'm sending it via a OneDrive or a SharePoint or a Dropbox link, and I need you to open it up, and it's secure. It's that sensitive. You're going to have to put your credentials in to be able to give me access or to be able to see that content. The moment that someone inside your organization does that, all the security around your environment ceases to matter from a prevention standpoint, because they just gave access to that threat actor to that user's account. And now the threat actor follows it, and they try to do things within that user's account. There are certainly things that we put in place around that to try to detect unusual user behavior. Even when there's a legitimate login, we're watching what's happening about how that user's interacting with your systems. Where are they logging in from? Is it their normal business hours? Are they logging in from two places at the same time? But it has to rise above a certain level of suspicion before it looks unusual enough that now they start tripping wires, and the threat actor can be detected, and now we can put the whole picture together. So think about, in your environment, you've probably seen similar types of attacks like this. We've seen correspondence where one organization gets compromised and then sends out a notice saying, hey, we think our account's been attacked. I want you to put yourselves in that mental perspective as we're talking through the first moment that you find out that something like that's going on. What's going to be your reaction process within inside your business? And Heather, I know that's only one example. I'm going to have you talk through some of the other types of cases you've seen or some of the other threat actor activity.
Absolutely. So this is a full spectrum of threats, obviously, and we are seeing a lot of these. The ones I want to focus on are the ones that we see the most of. Crime, that is obviously what Chad was just talking about, trying to get it's wire fraud. So trying to get wire transfers sent to the threat actor versus your real payee. And the threat actors are out there to make money, ransom demands as well. What we have seen evolve over the past 5 years is, especially during COVID, when ransomware went up about 300%, it was encryption. They were encrypting your servers, they were encrypting your backups, and so the ransom demands were paid to get that decryptor key so that you could decrypt the systems and get back to business. That has evolved. They still are decrypting systems, but while they're in your networks, they are exfiltrating as much data as possible. So we're oftentimes seeing a secondary ransom demand for them not to publish the data that they've stolen from you. And depending on your business, that data may be very, very valuable. So for example, we had an energy company, and the data that was exfiltrated was intellectual property, it was engineering schematics, it was customer pricing lists, which obviously you don't want those published. And so they paid to not have it not published. Another example are healthcare companies where the information that was exfiltrated was protected health information. So right away, they've got a data breach and possibly some HIPAA issues, and they have to report that to Health and Human Services. But threat actors know all of this, so they know it's a pain point, and they're trying to extort more money for information that they've taken, in addition to anything that they've encrypted. It's the insider threat. So for years, I think everybody knows about like a bad leaver or a bad arriver situation. So that's maybe an employee leaves you, they go to a competing company, they take intellectual property, they take customer pricing, maybe they take proposal templates, whatever they take. And so you do digital forensics, you figure out, okay, what did they take? Is there going to be any sort of litigation? Are we going to go after them? We have a case right now where they've hired an employee and they're getting sued that their former company thinks that they took information to this new company. And so the new company has to go through this employee's computer and phone to make sure that they didn't transfer any intellectual property. This has evolved as well, where threat actors are reaching out to individuals within corporations around the world. Now, we know this because some of our own forensic experts were contacted by threat actor groups, and the message is really clear. Keep your job, but if we call on you to send a phishing email or deploy malware and it results in any sort of payment from ransom, we'll give you 10%. To give you an idea, just in the past 18 months, the lowest ransom that one of my clients has paid is about $70,000. The highest is over $40 million. So if you're going to get 10% of that, that is some incentive. I think you all know how hard it is to find really good information technology people, information security people. So we see a lot of companies are outsourcing that or having subcontractors in other countries actually in their systems. And when we do a forensic investigation to figure out what happened, part of what we're looking for is who is patient zero. So which employee clicked on a link or entered their credentials or opened an attachment that allowed a threat actor in. And several times, especially in the past year, 18 months, we found that that patient zero was actually an employee or subcontractor of the company themselves. So insider threat kind of takes on a new meaning now. Next, Chad. So how a cyber attack works. This is not every case. The threat actor groups are predictable. We know that Black Hat acts a certain way. We know that certain ransom groups, they exfiltrate data all the time. Some of the ransom groups, we know we can negotiate them down by 60%. Others never exfiltrate. We have some that immediately start putting information on their leak site about any information that they found in your company. But many of them behave this way. So the entry point, like Chad said, a lot of the times we are seeing this come from your third parties, your business partners, your vendors, your customers. They're trusted. Your employees trust an email that comes from them. So whether they've opened an attachment, they've entered credentials, or they've clicked on a link, the threat actor gets in. That's the compromise, and their goal is to get as much information on your company as possible. So it's not like the movies. A skull and crossbones does not pop up on your screen the minute you've been hacked. We've seen threat actors in systems for as long as 6 months before detection, depending on the size of your networks. They're looking at your employee information. They are doing recon on what type of business you are. Sometimes they're looking at your financials. They're pulling up your cyber insurance policy. We've even seen it where they find your incident response plan and they're following along to see what's going to happen. They also are looking for any sensitive information they can extort from you to threaten to publish that information. So while they're in there, They're looking at all of this, and they're exfiltrating. And we've actually had some threat actors who will reach out to employees and say things like, hey, we have all of your information. We have all of your children's health insurance information. And we wanted a small ransom so that we don't publish this. But your employers don't care enough about you to even pay us $3 million. And we know from internal documents that your CFO made $5 million last year. So clearly they don't care about your privacy. These kinds of threats are escalating from threat actors. We've also seen them threaten to call regulators like the SEC. Once they have that foothold and they know what they have, we are seeing many times that the threat actors will sell that foothold to a secondary threat actor who will then deploy ransomware. And the way that we follow this is we go on the deep and dark web, which I don't recommend any of you ever try to go on. It's a horrible, terrible, scary place where you can buy humans and drugs and guns and deal with people like this. But they'll post out there, okay, we have a foothold in XYZ company. It's a $500 million company. We have persistence in there. We've got privileged access. We'll sell it to you for $100,000. You can demand a $10 million ransom. We see that a lot. We see it oftentimes in M&A transactions. We have a foothold and we know that this company is about to be acquired. So if you just wait for 3 months, then you can deploy ransomware into the new bigger parent company and get a bigger ransom demand. So like I said, this is not every ransom, but this is enough, and it happens often enough that it's become practice.
So let me help you put this back into personal mindset. And I'm sure many of you on this call have probably been involved in one way or another in responding to a cybersecurity event like this. And yes, these events are happening constantly. We recognize that we're all operating in a hostile outside environment, or even some cases with the insider threats. And we've got to be resilient. We've got to be able to still operate business in spite of these sorts of threats. But just to get that mindset going, for those of you that haven't already been there, think about how you'd respond, how you'd feel if Saturday morning, middle of the morning, you get a call because someone on your IT team detected something unusual and said, oh, okay, this is serious enough. We're going to call and we're going to go and wake them up. Your first thought is, how serious is this? What do we need to do? So let's talk about that first 24 hours in responding to a cyber attack like this. And it's not just one response to it. You've got this initial reaction, which is going to start your technical response and your business response, and ideally your forensic investigation. You don't get through all of these stages in the first 24 hours. Those first 24 hours, you're really just going to be going through the initial part of your technical response. You're going to be spinning up your business response. Ideally, you're spinning up your forensic investigation, all leading towards a future state where you can say, okay, we've weathered that. We've wrapped a bow on it. We understand what happened to the extent that it's possible. Now we're back into business recovery mode. All of that gives you opportunities for future refinement to the next time around on reaction. Heather, I'll turn this one over to you as far as what you're seeing for organizations in reacting to an incident.
So absolutely, stay calm. Don't make rash decisions. Please do not communicate with a threat actor. So we have some threat actors that have gotten really bold. Most ransom notes show up on the computer screen of your IT team. There is one ransomware gang out there that will send ransom notes to every printer in your company and keep hitting print over and over again till the printers run out of paper. Obviously, that makes it hard for you to then keep the attack a secret from your employees, but this one particular client, the CEO, got one of those ransom notes, got very angry, followed the instructions to get on the dark web to communicate with the threat actor, and basically said, we are not going to pay a terrorist, go pound sand. Then when they got us involved and do the forensic investigation and got outside counsel involved, we quickly learned that everything was encrypted as well as their backups. And when we went to communicate and try to negotiate with the threat actor, they said, this is the price, we're not coming down. They already told us, they already called us terrorists and they were mean to us, basically is what they said to us. So please don't communicate. There are professionals who do only this, mostly ex-law enforcement. So on my team, we have ex-FBI, CIA, Secret Service, federal prosecutors, people who have dealt with these threat actors. So don't communicate. Also, don't unplug your affected machines. Don't throw them against the wall, don't shoot them. All of these things have happened, unfortunately, with my clients. You want to remove them from the system, but don't turn them off, because sometimes turning them off, it erases the rabbit trail that we're looking for, that the threat actors are looking for. This is almost always going to happen to you on a weekend or late on the evening going into a holiday weekend. So ahead of time, know who your forensic response team is. That's usually an outside forensic firm. Know who your outside counsel specific to cybersecurity is. So if you have cyber insurance, they have approved panels of all of this. So it's your forensic responders, outside counsel, but don't try to find that in the middle of attack. Also, your incident response plan, make sure you have that printed out on paper. If your systems are down, you're not going to be able to access that. Same thing with like having phone trees of all of the appropriate people who are going to need to get involved at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. The first phone call with your forensic response team and outside counsel, typically those scoping calls are free. If, when in doubt, have that phone call. Unfortunately, I have a lot of clients who, after the fact, will send me an email and go, hey, we had a phishing attack this weekend. It's all under control, but just wanted to let you know. And I will say, like, please, let's have a phone call. Let my forensic experts talk to you, figure out exactly what you've done. We may be able to give you some advice. We may be able to give you some steps to make sure that the threat is not persistent, and maybe even do a small threat hunt in your system. If you don't do that, chances are this may escalate and you're going to call me back in 3 or 4 weeks with a full ransomware event. So small proactive steps are always a lot cheaper than a full response. Establish an out-of-band communication channel. The threat actors are in your email system, probably if you have a ransomware attack, and they are reading your communications. So even if you have access to your email and you think that it's not compromised, setting up a specific Yahoo or Gmail or whatever for this investigation is important. I do not recommend, and outside counsel does not recommend, that you use your existing Gmail or Yahoo or whatever you have, because if there's litigation, then that entire email box is discoverable. So we have people who will set up an email. It's their name, June 2025 at Gmail, and they're using it just to communicate with outside counsel and your forensic response team about next steps. What do we need to do for the forensic investigation? This first night is frantic, and know that you're going to need to probably have your IT team have some changes of clothes, some food and water. They may not leave the building for the next 3 or 4 days.
With that, thinking through this, and we've talked a lot of times in the past about, from a technical perspective, how the engineers, the IT team that you have go through and do the type of isolation steps and the investigation, pulling the pieces together to support forensic response, to support the business response. Most of those fall within the technical response, that initial technical response in the first 24 hours. As a leader, you have to help your technical team be successful in doing that, because while they've probably got their sleeves rolled up and they're in the system trying to help isolate this, respond to the various inputs they're getting from the expert teams and so forth, there's a lot of communication that still has to happen around that in the organization. If you can imagine, the people that are in the middle of this know a little bit about it, but the people that are outside of it only see the symptoms of what's going on. So as a leader, you've got to own those internal communications. You've got to be on point to be able to control the internal messaging. You don't want your other team members to start jumping onto social media, for example, saying we've been hacked, or start sharing that information out across the organization. Your technical response doesn't have those facts yet. Now they're feeding you some details and you're getting more and more information as you go, but you've still got to manage that messaging. I love the call out that Heather just made about being able to support the internal response team. It can be very hectic, especially during this first day, during this first week, until people are able to say we've got this contained, if not completely repaired. It's probably a 24/7 type operation. You have an active threat actor that is intentionally and adversarially trying to do harm to you and your business. It's people versus people at this point. So generally the team doesn't go to sleep at this point, because from the technical response, the threat actor is going to use those gaps to try to get deeper footholds or exfiltrate more information or do more damage. So just doing some of the basic logistics, like making sure that if you've got an internal IT team, they've got a rotation set up where they can get some rest, they can get food and water, the change of clothes and so forth, just supporting the team. But you've also got your business and your executive team that probably are going to be very involved in this too, supporting you and your business level decisions. They're going to need that same level of support infrastructure. So getting somebody assigned to be able to do that is really helpful. You might have multiple technical teams that are involved in the response. It may not just be your internal IT team. It may not just be a cybersecurity provider or an MSP like Aldridge that's involved. And the communication between all of those, when done right, they should all be confirming the identities of who they're corresponding with and that they're on a secure channel. That takes some legwork, and that's above and beyond just the individual technical response. So as a business leader, you can step in and say, okay, you're doing this, you communicate with me like this, let's get that rolling. Next check-ins at this point. And you're just coordinating the information because you're trying to uncover the pieces of a puzzle of what's happening during this. Your technical team's giving you feedback. You're still in the middle of it. You're trying to assemble all this. Throughout this, you're going to have to make some critical business decisions. And this is where having that incident response plan thought through ahead of time can really help, where you set thresholds or you set guidelines as a leader to say, if this, we're going to do this. If this, we're going to do this. If this, or this and this and this, we're going to do these things. So you don't have to think on the fly, am I thinking through all the critical things that we need to do to either continue business operations or make the decision to suspend certain business operations in response to this event. But that leads into the broader business response, and I'm probably speaking a little out of turn. So Heather, back over to you for that.
All right. So continuity plan, obviously, you critical business functions, know that they might or might not be able to be brought back on. So the biggest hurdle that we face as forensic responders and the outside counsel that we work with is there is pressure from the C-suite put onto the IT team to bring systems back up. We have to service customers, we have to pay our employees. There is a lot of pressure. Please never ever bring up systems until your forensic team tells you that they are clear of what we call indicators of compromise, IOCs. Indicators of compromise are little snippets that let us know that a threat actor is still in the system. If you bring something back up before we tell you it's clean, you will absolutely be reinfected, probably in 3 or 4 months, and you go through all this again. Now, what we always do is we get with the business team and say, what are your most critical servers? What's the most critical items that are encrypted or that may have been affected? Let's look at those first. Usually email is one of those, so that you've got communications. The decision to pay or not to pay a ransom, you all need to talk about that before you ever have a cyber attack. Most companies go, we're never going to pay a ransom. That's because you only hear in the news of the 1 or 2 big breaches that happen a year that companies pay the ransom. 60% of my clients pay a ransom. That means that several hundred companies just that I deal with, let alone my 15 peers within my company and the 20 other forensic firms that do this work day and night. And they do it as a business decision. So for example, if you make $50,000 a day in revenue and you can build from your backups, but it's going to take you 21 or 22 days to build those back, and the ransom demand is $500,000, then a lot of times it becomes a business decision that is cheaper to pay the ransom than it is to go that long. And not only are you losing revenue, but your customers are going to find someone else to serve them. They may not trust you. So the long tail of a ransom attack, as far as business interruption and customer satisfaction, is a lot longer than how long your systems are down, for sure. Identifying who has to be notified: employees, clients, your outside breach coach, outside counsel, the ones that deal specifically in cybersecurity. They can help you draft this language. It's not very often that my clients have to actually do a PR, do a press release, because a lot of them, it never becomes public that they've had a ransomware attack. But if you have cyber insurance, there are approved firms that do PR as well. Outside counsel can help you with that sort of communication. Deciding whether or not you're going to engage law enforcement. So the FBI has an IC3 form. If you have cyber insurance, you have to fill that out if you're going to pay the ransom. It's really a personal business decision whether or not you involve law enforcement. Depending on what your industry is, Homeland Security, FBI may ask for the indicators of compromise. They may ask for the IP addresses that we find that belong to the threat actors, because they're gathering information so they can warn other companies within that same industry if they're seeing a pattern. So for example, I have a lot of transportation clients, and last year there was one threat actor group that was specifically targeting US trucking companies. They were trying to hit infrastructure. So one of my trucking clients had DHS show up at their offices and say, we're seeing some chatter on the dark web about your company by the same threat actor group that we know has hit other transportation companies. So we did a threat hunt. We ensured they were clean, but there was some chatter about it. So, that's one reason to let law enforcement know about it. FBI will tell you don't pay the ransom, but like I said, about 60% of my clients end up having to do that. External communication, really know that it has to be clear messaging. Usually we've had an IT event, we've had a cyber event. Once the forensic investigation is completed and we know exactly where the threat actor moved within your systems, did they access information, did they exfiltrate any sort of data, then your outside counsel is going to work with you on specific data breach notification, where you will have to notify people, consumers, clients, employees, that a threat actor accessed their information, and that's when you'll be paying for credit reporting. So those are the letters we all get that say, hey, there was, we had an IT data security incident, there was unauthorized access. We don't think that anything has happened with your information, but here's 2 years of credit reporting. And side note, always take them up on that and do the credit reporting for those couple of years. Chad?
Heather, if I could share on that, DHS, we've even seen DHS respond to small and mid-sized businesses too, not even in hypersensitive sectors, where they have identified through their routine investigations and monitoring of internet activity, hey, this small business actually has some of their information that's published out on the dark web. There's exfiltration that this business may not be aware of, to the point where I've seen cases where DHS agents will actually show up at the small business office, very professional, and just say, hey, we need to talk to one of the executives. We believe that some of your private information has been pulled out of your systems and is available and it's circulating on the internet. And they'll actually show examples of this is what it is. We've been fortunate enough in several of those cases to be able to say, yes, we were aware of that one. We were aware of the exfiltration. We've been able to help out the executive team being able to respond to that. And it's been, okay, great, that's contained information. We know that that information wasn't sensitive. In other cases, it's been where, okay, that's very helpful to be able to have that, and it goes into the broader business response and the forensic response. There's another piece of data to be working with. So it's actually been very helpful in both cases. But I digress. Let's talk forensic investigation.
All right, so the purpose of this is we are trying to figure out, like I said earlier, patient zero. How did it happen? Where did the threat actor go within your systems? Who's affected, and what did they get? And how did they get in? That's our main goal. And then like I said, we are working with outside counsel. We want to make sure that we have all of the information of what the threat actor accessed or exfiltrated, not only for individual data breach notification, but regulatory issues. So like I said earlier, if it's protected health information, you've got HIPAA issues. If you're a publicly traded company, you have SEC reporting requirements. We also want to preserve evidence. The way that we do forensic investigations, the way that most forensic firms do, is we make full forensic images of everything and we work off of those. We are collecting all the evidence in the logs, because if there is any sort of litigation, then we do have all of that, with chain of custody and evidence lockers and things like that. But you also need all that information if you're going to submit a claim for business interruption. We can help you prove, okay, this is what was down and this is how long it was down for. If any of your systems or devices are made unusable, which we call bricking, where the threat actor and the malware actually turns your phone and computers into just bricks, we can help with that and let you know, like, yes, these are not good to use anymore. Our main goal is getting you back up and running. Like I said earlier, rushing that process will lead to reinfection almost all of the time. So the first phone call that we have with clients, I tell them, okay, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to your business. And it is going to take longer than you want it to take for you to be back up and running. We're sorry about that. It's a thorough investigation. And depending on the number of servers affected, depending on how big your infrastructure is, it could be 5 days, it could be 5 weeks. At the very longest, even if it's 5 weeks, that doesn't mean that nothing is working for 5 weeks. That means that we're slowly bringing up systems as they're clean, or if you've paid the ransom and you get the decryptor key, it's not a magic red button that everything is up and running. You actually have to run the decryptor key on all of those encrypted systems. That takes time. The 5 weeks at the the longest outset, that is, everything is done, everything is back to normal. The forensic investigation is complete and you're starting the data breach notification. But please know that it is going to be longer than you want it to be. I've had many clients have an attack on Friday night and ask me, are they going to be back up and running on Monday? Absolutely not. You're not going to be fully operational within 3 days, no matter who's doing your forensic investigation. It's not a secure thing to do.
Yeah. One of the things that I often see pop up in the conversations as businesses are navigating, reestablishing operations, we start talking about where are the circles of trust within the environment. And at the start, everything is outside that circle. There's nothing that you can trust until you can prove that's in a stable state. There are no indicators of compromise on it, and it's isolated in such a way that it's not subject to being part of the attack again or being brought into the attack. And it is a very difficult series of conversations, which makes it a great thing to think through in your incident response planning ahead of time, to think through what are the elements of technology, whether it's communication or line of business applications that your organization relies upon. What would you be most impacted by if the confidentiality or integrity or availability, as we're primarily talking here, of those systems were compromised? Because that can also be part of your game plan towards where do you prioritize efforts to minimize the business impact while you're generally disrupted? Where do we need to focus on reestablishing trust first and then working out from there? Within the whole recovery process, you've been involved as a business leader in navigating across these various groups that are working on your behalf to bring this back together. You're listening to the feedback and the advice from the forensic teams. You're listening to updates from your technical team. You're managing things within your business on it. It can be very easy at the end of it to say, we're recovered, let's just move on. And that's kind of a small business response to it. The more mature businesses that we see, usually at the start of the process, will establish meeting cadences for weeks following this event to say, we're just going to get this on the calendar now to do after action 1, after action 2, after action 3, and bring the information back together and intentionally lift yourself out of the weeds of, we went through a recovery process that was exhausting, everybody's tired. Let's go ahead and have a pre-scheduled time that we're recovered, we have information, let's get together and talk about the information that we got. You want to be able to close out with those external partners. All the people that got activated have findings and maybe they're continuing work. You still have to manage that all the way through to the point where they say, we've now actually closed this out, we've closed this out, we've closed this out. We have complete findings delivered to you. You have to assemble and make sure that you understand the information that they provided so that you can make meaningful business decisions on it. You certainly want to go through and evaluate your business performance, but your team's performances as well. What are the lessons learned? There are always changes in the security landscape. There are always ways to do it better, or there are always decisions that you make in the moment that you're like, oh, I didn't feel really well prepared to be able to make that decision. Those are the things to call out as potential lessons learned or key points during the event. Just keep a notepad, even if you don't even have technical systems up and running, saying, I wish this would have gone better. This didn't make me comfortable. This felt awkward. We weren't prepared for this. I didn't realize that this system didn't have a recovery plan that aligns to what my business objectives are. Great. Take all of those and those incorporate back into a strategic plan, a roadmap, lessons learned, incorporate those back with each one of your teams, incorporate the technical improvements, the security improvements, the security maturity improvements within your organization. This is also a good time to be thinking about, now let's do closeout messaging to our internal team. They saw the symptoms of this throughout. They heard about us giving updates through it. Your leadership team, you and your leadership team were sharing updates to try to maintain the messaging internally. There's going to be a lot of questions internally, and people are going to want to know what that looks like. So we close that out, which really goes more into the making the affected parties whole. You've got customers and partners that may also be aware that you went through something like this. Some of the outcomes from those teams, especially that forensic team and breach coaches and advisors, are helping you understand, here's where the potential areas of impact are. Now you can think about it from a business perspective, look at it from your customer's perspective, look at it from your business partners, your vendors, your employees, and say, what am I still going to be worried about? What do I need to hear from you to know that this is contained, and let's manage the exposure and let's rebuild that trust? Because at the end of the day, we're looking for resiliency. We want to be able to return to delivering the products and services that you're great at. To your customers, you've got to rely on your vendors. Your customers have to rely on you. This disrupts that whole pattern. That's what the threat actors are trying to exploit for financial gain. You've got to reestablish each of those pieces and take a very broad look at how did we make sure that we're managing it through each one of those. And then ultimately that's about reestablishing reputation, managing reputation. Ideally, you've preserved the brand credibility, you've done the right things on responding and communicating throughout the process, you've provided meaningful information without going into hyperbole, you haven't gone over the top on it. I appreciate some of the examples that Heather shared where you can actually undermine with too much communication or the wrong communication at the wrong time. You want to maintain that confidence throughout the whole process, and that's really where you're trying to get to. And I close there in this process by saying, think about in the first 24 hours, you want to be thinking about getting yourself into that best position in a recovery state at the end of the road, whether that's 5 days or 5 weeks down the road. And I think Heather's got some additional tips on being prepared for an attack.
Yeah, so I would say that most forensic firms at the end of the investigation will give you recommendations. And many of my clients will kind of jokingly say, like, I never want to speak to you again. You've done great, but please go away. And everybody's exhausted. Again, this is probably the worst thing that's happened to the business. Please take into consideration those recommendations, because the recommendations are based specifically on how the threat actor got into your systems. Sometimes they're costly, sometimes they're not, but heat mapping those and going, okay, these are the most critical things we have to make changes for. That means the next 30 to 60 days. The rest maybe can wait till another quarter, so that we can do that. But there are going to be recommendations. I also will make a note here about forensic reports. Sometimes companies say, hey, can you give us a full forensic report? And we always defer to outside counsel, because these things didn't used to be discoverable. And now there's been some court cases where forensic reports can be discoverable, where if you have litigation, then anybody who's suing you can figure out how did the threat actors get in? Was it because you all didn't have the right controls? And here's some recommendations, and it's 3 months later, which of these have you taken? We are seeing more and more class actions that result from those data breach notifications going out. So we have plaintiffs' attorneys who are getting together plaintiffs and filing class actions against companies that have data breaches. So that's just some food for thought there. Preparing for an attack, obviously, having an incident response plan, having it written, having it printed out, and knowing who the team is, and practicing that. So doing tabletop exercises, and when we do tabletop exercises, we make them real world, even if it's just 2 hours. That means that you are all in a room, your phones are put away, your computers are put away, because chances are they don't work anyway. And we're going to go step by step, like who contacts the forensic firm, who's your outside counsel, who's in charge of taking care of the systems and seeing which ones need to be quarantined. Who's going to do all of the forensic copying for for the outside forensic firm? Really going through and knowing what your job is, whose duties or whose. Do you have everybody's cell phone numbers? Because again, it's probably not going to happen during business hours. And do you have out of band emails already created? Making sure everybody's educated, and then always implementing the core cyber controls. So, implementing some software, having a really good MSP like Aldridge, that's not the end game. The threat actors, unfortunately, are always moving the goalposts. They're 1 to 2 steps ahead of us. They're using AI, like Chad mentioned, to write really good phishing emails, to write malware that can circumvent some of these controls. Again, they're using it for deep fakes as well. So we are seeing a lot of executives who are being hit where it's their phone number and their voice is calling their administrative assistant and asking for money to be transferred. So just know that all of the tools that we love, the threat actors are using them for evil. So these core cyber controls, these are twofold. So these are best practices from NIST and other cybersecurity experts. If these are things you should do to help keep the threat actors out. If you have cyber insurance, or if you're looking to get cyber insurance, these are the controls that most cyber carriers are requiring now. Multi-factor authentication. What we have experienced is just having multi-factor authentication on every single device that has access into your systems can reduce your risk of getting hit by ransomware by about 80%, because the threat actor does not have that secondary device to get the code to get into the systems. Doing vulnerability scanning, patch management, really staying on top of all of the software updates and patching, and endpoint detection and response. So most of you know about like SentinelOne or CrowdStrike. Those are companies that provide it's software that's on your system that is constantly looking for these indicators of compromise we've been talking about. The other things they can do is they'll quarantine a system if it's infected, and that's the difference of you're down for 5 days or 5 weeks. So is one system encrypted, or are 150 systems encrypted? And then disaster recovery and backups. Most companies have disaster recovery plans for hurricanes, fires, earthquakes, depending on what part of the country you're in. Having disaster recovery and immutable backups specific to a cyber attack is really important. Network segmentation, instant response plans we've talked about. M&A due diligence I talked about a little bit. Cyber carriers are looking at that because there is so much M&A activity right now, and threat actors know that. And unfortunately, we have a lot of clients that purchase companies and they end up purchasing ransomware because there's malware that gets deployed to ransomware post-acquisition. The top right, phishing exercises, cyber awareness training. I want to touch on that because you really need to do regular, robust phishing exercises and training, both regularly for all employees, but then extra training for people who are failing these phishing exercises. And the phishing exercises need to be real world. So threat actors will use what's going on in your city at that time and construct phishing emails that go along with that. So I'm in Houston right now. The Rockets are in the playoffs. We're seeing phishing emails that are offering, Rockets playoff tickets. They look like they're coming from HR. Things like that they're inducing your employees to click on links. So the same thing happens with concerts that are in town. So, whether you're using a service or you're sending out phishing emails yourself to test your employees, make sure that they're very specific, because that's what the threat actors are doing. They are doing their research and figuring out what's going on in cities. We saw a lot of Taylor Swift social engineering emails having to do with free Taylor Swift tickets all over the country when she was on tour, and they were very enticing, and a lot of employees clicked on those links, unfortunately.
Definitely want to put the layers of prevention and control in place to be able to detect unusual security events earlier, have the right people, have the right tools, have the right processes in place so that it can all work together. And again, it's all driving towards the right level of business resiliency.